Michelle, are you ready?
I was born ready.
She's an award-winning author, speaker, and podcast host who serves on the National Faith Advisory Council. She supported Donald J. Trump for president before it was cool. From her she shed in her beautiful backyard, this is the Michelle Moore Show.
Hello, everybody. So glad that you're with us today. Okay, so it's like producer Ron said, the joys of live television or live shows. So here's the deal. So Tara Reid was supposed to be with us today. She's been sick, and so she's still sick. So we're going to get her rescheduled. She is, just in case you don't remember, she was the White House staffer who was assaulted by Joe Biden, as she claims, back in 1993. So she's very sick. She's been sick for quite a few days. Hoped that she would be better in time for today's show. And she's like, I'm just not any better. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue what we did yesterday, what we began yesterday. So just in case you weren't with us, I'm going to update you on a couple of things real quick, tell you where to find everything. And I highly recommend that if you missed yesterday's show, that you go back and you watch yesterday's show as well, because there's some foundational things that we covered yesterday. And we are going to get into some more of this today. But so yesterday I was talking about Lin Wood and John McGreevy. So John McGreevy is a whistleblower. All right, we're going to try this again. Never had that happen before. I'm hearing that there's been many internet issues, and so we'll see. I hadn't had any all day today, so we'll see. Linka Anna says, this is happening all over the internet. Annoying. Hello, everybody. Hello, Linka Anna. And then SSW Razorback says, we have our own business, and we're hearing from associates that they're having weird tech computer issues daily now. Okay, so we'll see. I'm going to kind of recap what I was saying. We were expecting to have Tara Reid here today. She's the staffer that was at the White House who allegedly was assaulted by Joe Biden and back in 1993. And so she's been sick for quite a few days. She was hoping to be well enough to be on today. So we're going to reschedule her. Next week is already scheduled out, so we'll probably be another week or so before she's back on. But just so that you know. So yesterday we were talking about Lin Wood and John McGreevy. And so we're going to talk about more to do with that, because we actually, and this is going to work out perfect because we started that yesterday. So this will be great that it's back-to-back days. And then all of this is prep work for what you're going to learn from tomorrow's whistleblower. So we have a new whistleblower and he's going to be here with us. And so, but yesterday we actually covered John McGreevy, Lin Wood. So John McGreevy can be referred to as the Lin Wood whistleblower. And so he's not whistleblowing on Lin Wood. It's that Lin Wood helped to bring John McGreevy's information forward. Now, there was a lot of information that we covered. And one of the things that I do want to kind of recap as far as it goes with this section where they kind of do an introduction and they have a background is John McGreevy's education. So sometimes you just find that there are some people that are just really, really intelligent. And that's what it sounds like as far as John McGreevy and also tomorrow's whistleblower. You're going to end up realizing some of these people are just, I guess the government gets some of the best when it comes to education and all that. But he held graduate degrees. And so in physics, mathematics, biology, and chemistry from the University of Pennsylvania and Green College, Oxford. So, lots of stuff there. Okay. And so we covered a lot of basic background stuff in the first chapter of the transcripts. And so we have a document that is the whole thing. And there's a lot of stuff that we're reading through. It was really good yesterday. People said, yes, please do this some more. Because I'd said, look, I'll do this again. And we'll kind of keep working through these transcripts if you find value in it and it's helping. I'm able to also fill in some blanks here and there. And so people were saying yesterday, yes, please do that, some of the viewers. And so that's what we're going to do. We also covered one of the chapters in the transcript. They're kind of broken down by chapters. And the other one that we covered was the Judge Emmett G. Sullivan, not Smith, but Judge Sullivan. And so we covered that chapter as well. Today, we're going to start with Vice President Mike Pence. And so this is really the second chapter. It was after the introduction, all the background stuff and general stuff that's at the very beginning. The Judge Emmett Sullivan stuff is more toward the back. So I had pulled and kind of picked that out because there were some things in there that I felt like you needed to know and hear before tomorrow's guest. Okay. And so, but yesterday we covered, background. The Dirty Trick Squad was mentioned. You're going to hear more about them today and who all is a member of that. And so you're going to hear some more of that, okay, in great detail. But first, we're going to cover the chapter that's called Vice President Mike Pence, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So again, you got whistleblower John McGreevey, and then you got Lin Wood. I want to recap also the fact that I believe that Lin Wood is, some people want to say good or bad or whatever. So for lack of a better way, I believe he is a trustworthy source. And so let's take a look at the picture. There you go. So I showed this yesterday, showing it again today. I believed as soon as I saw this image, I believed that this was a comm, like a communication. Someone said, what do you mean a con, like a C-O-N? And I was like, no, I didn't say con. I said comm. So C-O-M-M, maybe even. There may be a second M in that for communication. So this, I believe, look at how big President Donald Trump is in the Oval Office with Lin Wood. And President Donald Trump is smiling really, 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 really big, right? And I had said yesterday, the only time I've ever seen him smile this big was when he was with the Pope. And I don't think he was just so happy to be with the Pope. I think it was because of what was going on behind the scenes. And so if you believe those stories, which I tend to believe some of that, that was going on behind the scenes to take down the Pope and the Catholic Church stuff that was going on. Remember, we always talk about the Tri-City State. We talk about how you've got, DC is over the wars and all of that war and terror. And then you had, the whole thing with England and stuff where you've got the banking in London. And so they had banking and finance. And then you had religion, and religion was out of the Vatican. And so not surprised that he was, working to take down the Vatican. So that's why I think there was a big smile then. And I think that's a clue that when there's a big old smile like this, something is up, and it could be a good thing. And I think this was a comm. It was a communication to us that this is a good guy and that all is well. So some people said, well, what about his chat on Telegram? I don't really, he has other people that manage that. And so if somebody's upset over something about a chat, I just wouldn't get too upset about that, because, you sometimes when you're relying on other people to manage something like that, that doesn't mean that it's a direct reflection on Lin Wood. I had a conversation this morning. Someone said, well, Lin has said publicly that he estimates that he has been infiltrated 70 plus times. Not surprised to hear that. Not surprised at all. And so if that's the case, like not all things are as they seem, or, somebody like, you have to give people a chance. And sometimes you just don't know until you've been down that road. Believe me, I know. And so this is, it's doesn't mean that just because he's had all these different negative, horrible experiences doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with Lin Wood. And I don't think there is personally. I just don't. I think that what he does do consistently, just in case you don't know this, he has this Telegram channel. And what I see him still consistently doing, and I just read 100 of his posts this morning because I'm about 1,300 behind. And so I caught up about 100 of them this morning early. And he says, fix 2020, the 2020 election. And so is that a good thing or a bad thing? I think we'd all agree that that's a good thing. And so I think it's a great thing that he keeps talking about it. Lin Wood keeps posting about it. He talks about the lawfare that is against him. He talks about all these things to support President Donald Trump. He shares scripture. He, is all these great things that he's done and doing. So as far as I'm concerned, I just can't find anything. I don't know. I just can't find anything bad. And I believe, again, this always go back to this photo. So I wanted you to see it. And I want you to notice how big of a smile President Donald Trump has. Okay, so John McGreevey was a whistleblower. He had some unique situations, unique positions. And I also want to say, I mentioned this yesterday, I think I said to you, in talking with different people, different whistleblowers, just people with different situations, everybody has different motivations. But it's interesting because ultimately, I think a lot of times people have to rely, and I think it really comes down to that. Oh, I did talk about this because I remember talking about, I think there always ends up a fork in the road at some point with a lot of people. Like, are you going to speak up? Are you going to stand by? What are you going to do? Right now they're talking about the whole Diddy thing, and people are going, well, if you were at the party and you knew kids were there and you didn't say anything, you chose a side, and it isn't good. And that's right. And so, in fact, we ran Allie Carter's stuff of her video that she released the night before last night. We announced that. And so she talks about that, if you were there. And I think she's absolutely correct. And I think that when you speak to some whistleblowers, like tomorrow's whistleblower, I see that with him. He ultimately, you come to a fork in the road, and you're either going to, stay the course and let evil do evil, or you're going to try to find a way to come forward and talk and tell the American people what's really going on. Because ultimately, I think sometimes that's really the only thing they have. The biggest thing is finding somebody to help them. And so I think that's been the biggest thing for tomorrow's whistleblower, is just really finding someone that would genuinely pick up the story and help them. And that's what we're going to do. And we're going to have them here with us tomorrow. So John McGreevy is a whistleblower. He's no longer with us. There's a lot of stuff going on. I've been working this morning, going through videos, going through interviews of his, and talking with someone who is a little bit more well-versed in certain things that I wasn't about John McGreevy. John McGreevy, again, worked through Lin Wood and that team. And so this is the transcript to some videos that were recorded. So if you go to michellemmooreshow.com, you'll see the transcript that we're reading from today. It's 100 and something pages. And then also you've got, which I started reading yesterday, and then we're going to read some more today and go through it. But then also there are 7 videos that we have on there for you. And they are, it has him blurred out. So he's known as John McGreevy, and he's also known as Ryan D, the letter D, White. Or sometimes you'll see Ryan Dark, D-A-R-K, White. And so we're going to go ahead and get started on this. And so what happens with them? So we're going to talk about the subject, the chapter about Mike Pence, and then we're going to do the Dirty Trick Squad, which was commented on and talked about just for a second yesterday. But today you're going to get some details, okay, about the Dirty Trick Squad. So the interviewer says, "All right, we're here again with Ryan Dark White, taking an interview for attorney Lin Wood. We're going to speak briefly about Vice President Mike Pence in specific." And by the way, this all happened. It says that the date of the recording was January the 9th, 2021. One of the things I said yesterday is I'm always surprised at how many people have never heard of the Lin Wood whistleblower. And so when I bring it up, it seems like maybe 8 or 9 people never heard of him. Only 1 or 2 out of 10 will know. And so it always just shocks me. And so this is why I'm kind of excited about covering this as a series, so to speak, because it's so much. Deborah Lynn W. says, a lot of people are saying that we need to fix 2020 before we have another presidential election. I wonder how this is going to go. Will there be an election? Some people are saying no. Yeah, we don't know for sure, Deborah. It's a great point. And I love that Lin Wood hasn't dropped it. And I think it's important that we're not going to vote ourselves out of this corruption. You're going to learn more about some of the details tomorrow, and you're going to see just how big all this is. Okay, so all right, so we're here again. And so he's talking about with the interviewer is saying, all right, we're here again with Ryan Dark White, taking an interview for attorney Lin Wood. And so it says, we're going to speak briefly about Vice President Mike Pence in specific, in as much amplifying detail as we can gather as to his relationships, no worries, as to his relationships and any crimes that he may be a part of. So when you watch these videos, Ryan White, he is blurred out some. And so they did that initially. We didn't know that he was John McGreevy at first, and he just went by Ryan D. White. So McGreevy says, all right, I didn't realize I was on. Okay, Mike Pence, when he was in Congress, he had been surveilled multiple times. He was known to be bisexual, but tries to keep it hidden. He puts forth a persona of uber Christian. When he was governor, he was very strict on the gay and lesbian communities, things like this, to hide that. He was surveilled then, and it was well known that the FBI, CIA do illegal surveillance of many members of, politicians at all levels. To get it, it's all illegal, meaning to surveil someone. He's saying it's all illegal, what they're doing to get the goods on these politicians. He says, but they want the leverage, and it is well known. They said, and then the interviewer interrupts, it looks like from the way it's written, and the interviewer says, so he was just kind of caught up in a dragnet of just general surveillance of congressional members. And then John McGreevey, the interviewee, says, I mean, it was known, there were rumors. And then there's a little bit of an inaudible section. And so it's noted as inaudible. And he says, down and did the surveillance, though. The interviewer asks John McGreevey and says, just to have a good baseline for the future, I suppose. And John McGreevey says, well, one, he is a politician. The interviewer says. And then John McGreevey says, well, he'll be around. He has influence. So the FBI is all about getting influence. Now they're dirty, so they control it. It's just like they control it every day. They don't, tell them like, do this, do that, this, and this. He says it's just when they need the big one that they can call it in. So in other words, people aren't blackmailing the vice president or whomever or a governor on a day-to-day thing. What John McGreevey's explaining is that they get the goods on them. So that way, if there's something big going on, they've got it to hold over their head, but it's not day-to-day stuff. And then when he became governor, he felt more secure to pursue his long-term relationships. Like I said, we covered some of this yesterday. So like I said, there's one roughly 20 years, his junior, that talking about a male lover. So was about 20 years younger than Mike Pence, was Mike Pence's supposed lover. I say lover, whatever you want to call it. And so he says his junior, that was a longer term one, and that he had went back when he was in Congress. And then there was one that was much more sporadic, but that gentleman's about half his age. We talked about both of these guys yesterday. He says the one that's half the age, he says he's the one that introduced the younger and younger people to him. Now, we talked about this yesterday. So he says, but as governor, he felt that he was much more secure, not as wide open and able to pursue it. And he went the other way with his politics and cracked down on gay and lesbian communities. He would never have anything to do with that. There's some inaudible part in there. And so, but he's saying, that kind of as a cover, apparently, while Mike Pence was governor of Indiana, John McGreevey's describing that Mike Pence really kind of cracked down on the gay and lesbian communities, I guess, as a cover. He says, and then the interviewer said, now Mike Pence is known to never be in public with another woman besides his wife. Do you know that? Has he ever been seen in public with these young men? Was that something that he felt like he needed to hide, or is that just kind of swept under and then John McGreevey kind of interrupts and says, I don't know if he was in public with them or not. They would usually set up a location that was already wired up before he got there, talking about Mike Pence. He says, so, or it was a known location, or the location like the younger gentleman was helping. So the younger guy, half the age, was working to help get the goods on Pence, is what you end up finding out in this. He says, and he helped set him up. And he said, so he would tell them, hey, they're going to meet. And so in other words, the guy that was bringing in the younger boys that were below age, supposedly, that was half Mike Pence's age, and he was bringing in these younger boys. He was actually helping to set up all this stuff and telling them ahead of time, where they were going to be. He says that's why he was the one that was about half his age. Was, I've seen the videos. I mean, I've seen a few of them from when he was in Congress, but I've seen these from when he was a governor and made copies of them, and Sean encrypted them, Sean Bridges. So that guy was actually working with the FBI to help set him up, talking about setting up Mike Pence. And so he would provide locations where they were going to meet, and they'd be there ahead of time. And so they had, these were probably the best surveillance tapes that they had of him. The other ones would be this or that, some better than others. But this one, you got the whole group. And the interviewer says, And then John McGreevey continues and says, and when he actually got into talks about being vice president, running with President Trump, they shut it down because they had everything that they needed to control the vice president. This is scary stuff. And it looks like they did. In other words, they had everything they needed to be able to control Mike Pence. The interviewer says, And then John McGreevey continues and says, so, then, of course, he was involved with the other stuff with Rod Rosenstein or Steen and Roberts, talking about Chief Justice John Roberts, to control, get President Trump out of there. Paul Ryan and Romney, those were the people mostly involved in it. They wanted to get President Trump removed in any way possible so that he could become president, talking about Mike Pence. So if Trump went out, then that meant what? That the vice president would become president. And so we covered this yesterday. And so he felt that he had been passed over. He was due. In other words, he felt like it was owed to him. It was his perfect time. And he had actually ran for president in the election and was quickly surpassed by President Trump. So he felt slighted and did not like President Trump for any reason, especially that one. The interviewer says, so was there an active plot between him, between Mike Pence and Rod Rosenstein and Ryan? And then the John McGreevey says Romney. And the interviewer says Mitt Romney. And he says, uh-huh. And so the interviewer asks, well, can you discuss what that might have looked like? And the interviewee, John McGreevey, says, the whistleblower says they wanted to remove him any way possible. They had worked with Roberts prior to this, talking about John Roberts, prior to the actual election. Roberts had actually helped them write up the FISA warrants with Peter Strzok. And then a little bit of inaudible, and then said would write them up maybe, and Roberts would send them off to be signed by whoever judge that he controlled. But they had started this, but once he was elected, once Rod was appointed, the focus shifted to Rod Rosenstein, and that was up to him using that guidance of what he wanted to do. And he coordinated with all the deep state Democrats, whatever you say or want to say to take them down. He said the Russian collusion with Mueller and Comey, who were involved in it, they were the ones getting information back and forth from various governments. They were the ones handling the information from ghost stories. They continued. That was them. Now Mueller ran ghost stories from way back. The interviewer says, okay. And then John McGreevey continues and says, so they were all involved in it. They were trying to remove President Trump in any way, shape, or form. It was Rod Rosenstein, who wanted to go after the 25th Amendment. In other words, that's how they wanted to get Trump out. And he has definitely worn a wire before. So it wasn't a joke. It was a serious threat. And they tried many, many times. The interviewer says, okay, are you aware if President Trump was ever made aware of this during the administration as far as the underhand dealings that Pence is associated with? And John McGreevey says, I don't know for sure. I had hoped. I made a tape in 2016 in Baltimore with this one group, and it was made expressly to get to Devin Nunes. But there was a member of this group who, well, he was unprofessional. It was all about him. When they saw what was on it, Devin Nunes was very impressed with it, as was Kash Patel, and they wanted the rest of it. He had only given them about a 20-minute sample of a 3.5-hour tape. So in other words, John McGreevey did a 3.5-hour tape of all different kinds of information. And this guy gets in the middle of the mess and gives like a 20-minute sample to Kash Patel and Devin Nunes. He goes, but he got in the middle of it. He wanted to control it. He wanted everybody to come to him for the source. And I was like, just give it to them. They need to know. This was right after Rod had been tapped for DAG, but not accepted. He accepted it, but he hadn't actually taken the office yet. And I'm trying to warn him about what he's really like. And he's working with Pence. And it's like, this is going to be terrible. He says, but then this guy got in the way and screwed it all up. So by the time, and then the interviewer says, this is Matt Couch. And John McGreevey says, yes, Lumpy Lovesy, that's him. But yeah, he messed it all up, and he wanted to get in the middle, and he wanted to be the hero. It was all about him and the donations, and he immediately turned on Mr. Brutowski. He says he's a very kind man who wanted to really help. They wanted everything immediately, and he wouldn't do it. He's negotiating with them for weeks and weeks, and then by the time that they finally got a copy, it was a blank copy. It was just all bad. Yeah, he screwed it all. And he says, John McGreevey continues and said, and once it finally got to them, they had moved on. Talking about once it got to Devin Nunes and Kash Patel, Kash Patel and Devin Nunes had already moved on. You finally get a tape. It's finally, passed on to them, and it's blank. So I don't know what's up with that. He proceeds to say he really ruined it, and he ruined the warning. Because I told him, I said, now look, here's me. It's on the video. It's me. I've got my background. It's gonna. And then he's a little bit inaudible. And then it says, me, I don't care. Give it to them. He needs to know this. And so he's talking about Devin Nunes, I believe. He says, I thought it was very exciting, President Trump's presence, and he messed it all up. So the interviewer says, okay. John McGreevey proceeds and says, people tried. And the interviewer says, can you give me some more details on the Hammer, Sunrise, and Sunset, and how the leak, that spy ring was working at the time? John McGreevey says, yeah, like I said, and these are software, what, and a known female that's in the room. So there's the interviewer, the interviewee. The interviewee is John McGreevey. He's the whistleblower. And then there's a woman that keeps getting mentioned here or there. She hasn't said much throughout, but I noticed this yesterday as well. And she's mentioned throughout. So so he says, like I said, and these are software, what? And the unknown female says, no. The interviewee says, oh, I thought you were waving. Okay, these are software. They're software. You can tailor it to what you want. Hammer's the big one. So Hammer is the name of the software. He says that's Sunrise. There's Sunrise, and that's the one that's also military but narrowly focused. Sunset is one, same thing, but focused more on the surveillance side that they would use to exploit. I don't know, phone records, computers, things like this. It's more of a civilian version of it. And the interviewer says, is this Hammer the supercomputer as mentioned lately in the Hammer scorecard with the recent election? John McGreevey says, yes. The interviewer says, okay. And John McGreevey continues and says there were people involved in the, vote manipulation. You're going to want to listen closely to what's getting ready to come out. He says they had taken care of that as well because they were using it not just in the election, they used it or in the selection. He says because they were using it not just in the selection, they used it in 2018. It was all set up in 2016 when they lost a lot of their control over the satellite stuff. So they moved it overseas. That's Dr. Molly McCauley. That was her forte. That's why she's no longer with us. But as far as Hammer, it was running out of Fort Washington, but the satellite service was in Baltimore, and it was a CISSP computer. It was computer crimes, internet, things like that. So it's the DOJ supercomputer. It's hooked into everything, and it was run through there. Something inaudible, and then it goes into individual pieces. You could drive out and find an open port and go through the post office or porn sites or FedEx or whatever you wanted. And the VA was wide open in many spots. So that was one of the favorite ones that Sean and other people used to go through and infiltrate and get access and then come back and do what they needed to do. They went through the post office to place child porn on Miss Atkison's husband's computer, and that was Sean. So they attempted to remove it later and didn't get all of it. But so, that's just how they operated. And this was normal, everyday, completely illegal, but normal, everyday business for them. Interviewer says, okay, is there additional information that we can get on Pence? Talking about Vice President Mike Pence for this that would, as far as shine a light on current events, being that they are here. John McGreevey says, well, I mean, he was always a snake in the grass. He was the mole. He never liked Trump and was only there to act like, he's something inaudible. And then it says him to get the position, and all we've seen recently, what he did with it and was preparing for that the whole time. There's something inaudible. And then he goes, in 2016, I tried to warn the president of what was really going on, especially Rod-centric, talking about Rod Rosenstein, things that had to do with Rod Rosenstein. He was working these people and what they had planned, but it didn't get there, as we discussed. But he's a scumbag. I mean, he's compromised. He's been compromised. He knows it. And then the interviewer says, have you ever heard of any foreign interference or any type of affiliations outside the country with Pence, Mike Pence? He goes, well, with Mike Pence, or with Pence specifically, a lot of stuff was given to China, Iran and China. A lot of software, the programs, things like this, a lot of tech was given to Iran, he says, which immediately ended up in China's hands. And then something inaudible, and it ends with China. In 2016, actually before that, Molly McCauley is who he's talking about. He says, so in 2016, actually before that, Molly had discovered the satellites were being used to manipulate elections. It was used in 2016. Huge, just like we've seen recently. And then they lost control of that when President Trump won. So in 2018, a lot of that had already been transferred overseas, Iran, Italy, China. And then I wrote about that a couple of years ago about what they had done. So they had already exposed all that. It had already gone over there. So they went kind of old school in 2018 to take over the Congress to get Nance. And then it becomes inaudible. So you don't hear, apparently the transcriptionist couldn't figure out what was said. He says they had recooked the books as many as they needed, much lower key. This time they just went nuts with it in every fashion. He says, the interviewer says, okay, now Pence's wife. So we're talking about Mike Pence's wife, Karen. He says, how witting is she in all the pedophilia in all of this? The interviewee, John McGreevey, the whistleblower, says she covers up for him. She's completely a political animal. One of the reasons that the younger guy was sporadic is because she felt that it was more dangerous and was harder to control. It was, he'd pop up. It wasn't something necessarily scheduled. I mean, he'd pop up and then it would be scheduled later, but it wasn't something that was set. So like on a regular schedule is what he's trying to say. So to her, it was much riskier. So, but she was the manager and then the interviewer says, okay. And then John McGreevey continues and says, she's the one who kept it quiet. And then the interviewer says, would she be aware of the pedophilia as well with the young children? Interviewee, John McGreevey, says, oh, sure. The interviewer says, yeah. And the interviewee, John McGreevey, says, I mean, it's not like he hid this stuff from her because she managed it. Uh-huh. John McGreevey says, and then the interviewer says, just as complicit? And he says, huh? John McGreevey says, huh? She's complicit in this? Says the interviewer. John McGreevey replies, oh, yeah. Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. Oh, she knew all that. She knew about it for a long time, and so is Roberts. I mean, Roberts is flat out gay. Talking about Chief Justice John Roberts. Roberts is flat out gay. At least he is now. I mean, he has been ever since he was a child, which nothing wrong with being gay, but you're high and manipulating stuff. And so the interviewer says, okay, do you have any questions for him on Pence? The unknown female says, I guess just wondering how he's been able to keep all of this from his public life. So she's saying like, well, how's Mike Pence been able to keep this from the public life? John McGreevey replies, yeah, well, what's your opinions on how he's been, the interviewer, not John McGreevey, says, yeah, what's your opinions on how he's been able to keep this so quiet? And John McGreevey says, Pence? Interviewer says, yeah. Unknown female says, yeah, too. And so again, the question is, what's your opinions on how he's been able to keep this so quiet? And John McGreevey replies, well, I mean, the company he kept in Congress, we're all the same. They're all under surveillance. They're all dirty in one fashion or another. So many of them are dirty. It's very disarming. And his wife manages the stuff, and he could do deals. If something did come out, they could, quash it. And so, they could make a deal. They could, and if something was hinted at, they could address it. Because he had political power, either there or governor or whatever. And so I'm sure things came out as they do, but for most of them, things go away too, especially in that, and then it becomes inaudible again. The female sitting at the table, she says, were you aware of any of this going on from 2016 to 2020 in the White House or anything? Or did it just, did he keep it all outside? And so John McGreevey says, oh, his male relationships? And she says, yes. And so John McGreevey replies and says, I don't know if he maintained them after the election, meaning when Mike Pence was vice president, he's not really sure, And so if he maintained those relationships with those particular men, those two men after the election, it was so important to keep him buried, run silent, run deep. We talked about this yesterday. And so that's how they described it. They would have saved him. They wouldn't save him. So he did provide info. He actually let stuff leak. He let stuff leak from certain conversations the president had with a staffer. And then there's something that's inaudible. And he goes, the staffer be blamed because it was somebody that Mike didn't care for and it got out. The president blamed them because of the prior conversation, but it wasn't really actually them, not at all, not in all cases, but some. So in other words, Mike Pence would let a staffer take the fall for something Mike Pence was the leak, but because President Trump had a conversation with a staffer, he just assumed it would have been the staffer and not Pence. He wasn't realizing it was the vice president. He says at that point, I don't know if he had any other relationships or maintained the same ones because I just didn't have the access anymore to it. So I can't say, but it was mostly important to them to keep it quiet or keep him under control because that was an ace in the hole they needed. The interviewer says, okay, all right, well, thanks. And so that's the end of the Mike Pence section. I'm going to go on ahead and read viewer comments before we move on to the Dirty Trick Squad. And so Deborah Lynn says, I have a feeling that Karen Pence was somehow involved in all of her husband's pedophilia. Pedophilia is rampant in the U.S. politics, which needs to stop. Yes. So she just apparently wrote that. So you probably, I don't know if you'd heard all of this part about her before you wrote that. Linka Anna 59 said Roberts was picked by Bush Jr., easy to threaten authority and blackmail. Yeah. And so he was appointed. And so let's see. Celeste said, I did not heard any of this. Amazing. Yeah. And so this was back, when we were talking about J6 time. This was actually, I think if memory serves me right, it was released on Telegram with Lin Wood on his Telegram channel. I want to say like the 19th of January before Biden was inaugurated, so to speak. So before that event happened. Okay, so we're going to keep going. The next section is called the Dirty Trick Squad. Now, we're going to find out in this section exactly who is in the Dirty Trick Squad, where they work, all that kind of stuff. And so this is like a little group, and they got together, and all these little grown men get together, and they named themselves the Dirty Trick Squad. All right, so the interviewer says, all right, so I'm going to ask you if we could get into some more of the details with the Dirty Trick Squad and how Rod Rosenstein, was a part of that, and if Roberts, talking about Chief Justice John Roberts, had any type of interaction with the group as well. Now, we talked yesterday about Antonin Scalia and some of the details about that as well. So make sure you go back and watch yesterday's show. There was a lot of details. There is some overlap with yesterday and then details today that we didn't get yesterday in that section. So, okay, interviewee says Dirty Trick Squad was just a nickname. It's certainly, so this is John McGreevy. He's talking. He says Dirty Trick Squad was just a nickname. It certainly wasn't anything official. In other words, it wasn't on the books. You know what I mean? And so he says it certainly wasn't anything official. This was a group of people that were either dirty or they controlled. I was one that was controlled. Okay, so this is John McGreevy talking. There was Rod. He's talking about Rod Rosenstein. He says Sean Henry. He was FBI. Sean Bridges, he was Secret Service. Joseph Rosati, Rosati, who was with the DEA. There was Alan Brososhok, was ATF. Gregory Utz, UTZ, who was the TFO with the DEA. I don't know what a TFO is, but probably something officer or something with the DEA. But he was formerly Baltimore County Police. That was the basis of the Dirty Trick Squad. You had the computer experts, you had the muscle, you had the tactical experts, and that's what they were doing. And then there was another group in Fort Washington. He was running one down there. This was the satellite location in Baltimore just for the really illegal stuff, illegal communications, hacking, phone tapping, you name it. They concentrated their main efforts all the time. Title III judges, federal judges, but they would go after anyone, political rivals, sitting politicians, anybody they needed to go after, anybody they were pointed at. They went after family members of judges, compromised people as much as they possibly could. They had no problem hacking computers and planting information to compromise people. This is something that they had done numerous times. Rod had done this for years and years, so had Sean Bridges, where they would finagle a case. They had before the court where, for instance, they would arrest a gentleman and he had money, he had property, and he had the resources to fight them. They didn't like that. So Sean would go in and plant child porn on their computer. And, what do you know? Oh, the examination. Now you got this on there. I don't know anything about it. Well, it's on there. We're going to have to charge you. And then he would, he didn't want to ruin his life and didn't want to go to prison as a pedophile. You know what happens and things. And they would use this as leverage in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases. And then he would plead, the person they charged would plead to a lesser charge that would not show up on the record, but he would have to forfeit property, money, things like that, and they would skim their percentage off. Sean Bridges was particularly good at it. It was his specialty, and he had done this at the county and state levels and got in trouble a couple of times, which is why he came under the sight of Rod Rosenstein, who got him up to federal. Sean did not like Obama, didn't like Hillary. He had access to the White House, the Air Force One, the CIA. He had those kind of clearances as the number one expert on forensic study of the computers for the Secret Service than most of the government. So the interviewer asks John McGreevey, now, was he a government employee? Was he a contractor? What was? Oh, he was Secret Service. He was a Secret Service agent, John McGreevey says. So the interviewer says, okay. And then the interviewee, John McGreevey, says a full Secret Service agent. So he had access to all these things because of his clearances, because of his expertise. He could go anywhere. He was often in the White House, texting the location of the president and Obama and what they were doing. He hacked into Obama's BlackBerry just for fun, things like that, and shared messages with people, hacked the girls' phones. I'm thinking he means like Malia and Sasha, the Obama girls. He says, it was nothing. And then there's something that's inaudible. And then he says he had a list of people that he just, call up and watch them do their daily stuff. He's just truly gifted with the computers. I'm good at the computers. I can do any of it you need, but he's just one of those people born to do it. He can just do it like breathing. He's a violent person, which believes his size. He's only about 5'9", 5'8", and he's maybe 120 pounds when he's not drinking, but he is a violent person and arrogant, and it's all about the money. This was the core group of the Dirty Trick Squad, and that's all they did was hack people, steal information, alter emails, manipulate things, and sell intelligence, launder. Sean Wesley Bridges, the Secret Service agent, was the foremost expert on e-commerce and Bitcoin. That's what he actually is in prison for. And we mentioned that yesterday. By the way, it gets brought up. So, and their illegal profits that they would skim off, or they would target people with cash or different bank accounts, anything they could skim, they would run it through Bitcoin. He'd launder it for them, and he still holds millions of dollars online in various accounts. He also holds several passports and would disappear as soon as he's released. So remember, he's in prison at the time. I don't know if he's still in prison or what's going on, but at this time, this is the case. The interviewer says, well, do you know where he'll disappear to? And John McGreevey says Central or South America. He's discussed Argentina and Colombia as possibilities because his wife's family is from there. They have family there. He was able to purchase illegitimate passports and documents from governments in South America, and he has the money to do so. So he's all about the money. The interviewer says, can you tell me about Alan Borshak? Borshak, he's ATF. He's retired now. He's a nasty piece of work. He gets involved in his official capacity with the illegal gun running for Fast and Furious. He was the one that made sure the paperwork stayed clean and things came back in the country. So he was ATF, okay? They were spying guns supposedly that, would be tracked. Then he made sure things stayed clean as far as serial numbers, things like that. He's been dealing guns his entire career, as far as I know. He has lots of disposable money at his disposal. He has lots of cash at his disposal and things like that. He lives very well. When Rod started falling out of favor at the DAG, they felt that there was already thoughts, Borshak, they felt that their protection was leaving. So Borshak and Rossetti both divorced their wives, no contest, put everything in her name, paid off their existing house with, I think Rossetti, it was over $300,000. Borshak was even more in cash, bought another house. It was like $250,000 in down payment for cash, lived there. Rossetti lived with his wife that he just divorced. And so the interviewer says, now, when you say cash, you mean by transfer or by hard cash? They actually had cash to pay all things. And the interviewer says, okay. John McGreevy continues, and were able to come up with large checks as well. But yeah, actually, he lived with his wife. He always had cash. Now, if you look at him on the surface, he's barely getting by. DEA agent who owes money to several people. The interviewer says, is this Rossetti? Or he says, Rossetti. And then the interviewer says, oh, okay. Or he says, oh, it is. Okay. Could you do Borashak? We'll get to Rossetti in a second. John McGreevy says something, but it's mumbles, and the transcriptionist can't tell. The interviewer says, to keep it all straight. Well, Borashak, gotcha. Borashak divorced his wife the same time as Rossetti, paid off the house, gave her about $600,000 as part of the settlement, put everything in her name after paying off the house in cash, bought a large condo on the Potomac for himself, has a custom van filled with road race bikes that he likes to bicycle. These are all $10, $12, $15,000 bikes that are custom made for him, his size. They're measured and everything. This was just one of his hobbies. He's got watercraft and cars and all kinds of stuff. Never has a problem finding cash because he's dealing guns and helps people clear up stuff that is out there. He helped buy the firearm for Seth Rich. Okay, very good. So now on to Rossetti. Joseph Rossetti, says the interviewer. John McGreevy says, uh-huh. And so the interviewer says, let's discuss. I know you've got a bit more information on him than some of the others. So interviewee, John McGreevy, the whistleblower, says, well, Rossetti's a DEA steroid freak. He's like 6'2" or so, a big bodybuilder. He's a violent, nasty, lying person. He always has been. It's not just me saying it. This is the other people that he's worked with. Other agents have complained about the same thing. There are dozens of those, dozens of cases where he has added drugs to stings. There's an instance. So in other words, he's planting drugs on in sting operations is what that sounds like. There's an instance where there's one drug case that there were 15 agents involved, and the only complaints in the case from the people being arrested were about Rossetti, and the exact same complaints from the agents. He always had to be the one to swoop. He never did any work. He always, he was always the cowboy. He had to be out on his own. He's always the one to swoop in with the big bust. 14 agents would find 30 pounds of marijuana, and he would swoop in all by himself out of nowhere. And, oh, I got a kilo of coke, and make the big bust. And they complained. Agents on numerous cases and in numerous locations would complain about him doing this. He's also been sued many times by people who flat out said, I'm a drug dealer. I sell marijuana. I've never touched the other stuff. It's all I've ever sold. I don't believe in it. But he added to it. And I mean, the exact same complaints over and over from not only, defendants, but agents working with him. And when things would get too bad, they would just move him off into another region, another district. And he's a nasty, violent person that I've personally had to deal with. So I want to make sure you all understand. So what they're saying is, like, you might catch someone that was a marijuana dealer, says, I don't believe in any of the other stuff. Yes, I'm a dealer. I've admitted it. It's marijuana. That's what I do. Don't touch anything else. Well, then Rossetti would swoop in and act like the big cowboy, so to speak. And he would plant, is what it sounds like, cocaine. And so kilo of coke, like that one example was said. So I just want to make sure you're following what this is meaning. So the interviewer asks, well, now you've mentioned in a previous tape that he and Borashak were involved with the Seth Rich murder. Oh, there were the interviewer. Okay. So we're still on the interviewer. So he says, now you've mentioned in a previous tape that he and Borashak were involved with the Seth Rich murder. Are there any other murders that you know of or have heard that he may have been associated with? And if so, how were they perpetrated? So then John McGreevy responds, well, Borashak was involved. He supplied the firearm and made it disappear after, or he got it destroyed. Rossetti was involved with the Seth Rich. He was there. He's the one that picked up the MS-13 people outside the city and brought them in, got them out of the city. He says he brought Kevin Daughtry with him. Kevin Daughtry was kind of a hang-around wannabe federal agent, sucked up to them continuously, hoping to get an appointment. He's a big wannabe. always had a different story about his background. He's apparently did almost a year in the Marine Corps many, many years ago, but they used him as kind of a gopher. He was there that night. Kevin Daughtry's actually the one who attempted to kill Jack Berkman later on because he was being exposed in the crime, and he's in prison for that now. So they've been involved in many murders. This is Borcherac and Rossetti, and he says that they're very tight. They would do things where they would, of course, selling guns to gang members later, resulted in murders, deaths, and they would call it fishing. They would sell them off. Sometimes they'd even leave them there. They would come up. It's very easy for them to come up with firearms. They would sell them off, and then Borcherac would, trace the serial numbers and see if it was related later on down the road to any shootings or deaths. It was fishing. That's what they called it, fishing, and see if they got one because to them it was great. This is similar to the Fast and Furious idea. John McGreevy says, yeah, it was just their version of it, just a local version, and then John McGreevy says it was their version, same time, same time frame, what they were doing. But they would track the serial numbers just to see if they got it that could have been used in a crime or in, at one point I thought they were even keeping score, but they would just celebrate. They just thought it was funny that they'd made the money and they'd killed each other and ha, 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 great fun. I mean, Richard Rosati has been known to use poisons on people. The interviewer asks. John McGreevy answers or replies, yes, or he says he's been known to help people overdose, give them hot shots, pure drugs, to shoot them, to kill them, to overdose them. He's done this to informants, things like this that he's used, and he's done it several times as far as I know that he's bragged about. Informants, because he'll have informants and then he'll start dealing with them, start dealing drugs with them. He'll start moving products to them, especially pills. And then when they think that they've had enough leverage on him, they come back and have something. Well, they'll just set them up, and then they overdose and they're gone. So yeah, the interviewer says, okay, you mentioned that he's also involved in pharmaceutical. Oh yeah. Interviewer says pharmaceutical fraud. And then John McGreevy says pharmacy. Yeah, pharmaceutical. I don't think he's got the brain for it. He as a DEA agent, he uses authority to manipulate pharmacies and shipping and inspections. The DEA inspects pharmacies once a month, especially the narcotic shipments. Generally, the pharmacies are divided. All the medications over here are narcotics and they're supposed to be inspected. Well, he would oversee the inspections and he'd write them off if they had more. If they had less, then he would move them through there. He would sign off on it and everything looked fine. The numbers would match up. They accounted for everything. And yet they still, they got 30,000 more pills sitting there because they're selling it for him. Oh, goodness. Wow. These are pharmacies. Ray Carr says Rod Rosenstein was considered brilliant, but a psycho to those who dealt with him. We saw the interview. Yeah. Doberman Mommy says, have y'all noticed how the soft reveal has become less soft? It's coming faster and then intense now and more intense now. Well, the thing is, I just want to keep in mind here that this is all the way back from January of 2021. So you're talking about 3.5 years ago that all this came out. This is not breaking news. And so what I want to make sure I make clear, though, is that this is something that I noticed that many people don't know about it. And so, it's timely because of tomorrow's whistleblower. And I felt like you all needed some foundational information so that you can take everything in tomorrow with the whistleblower. So he did all that kind of stuff. They would short prescriptions. Wow. So like you're supposed to get 30 pills, they might give you 28. Oh, wow. I mean, think about that. Have you ever gotten a bottle of pills, like pain pills, and there's supposed to be so many in there? Do you get it home and then count the pills or count the pills right there in front of the pharmacist? Wow, that's a lot to think about. Maybe next time you get a prescription, you might want to do that. But it was just the pharmacies ordering these massive amounts of opioids that he was working with, and he would take them and sell them on the street, sell them to another pharmacy, moving them through another pharmacy and getting paid for it. And he was manipulating their inspections. It was what he was doing there. And then when again they became problematic or didn't want to do it anymore, or felt that they were too exposed, or local police had come to their door because they had heard something, he would boom, I don't know, I'm DEA, and he would distance himself and shut them up, threaten them, and go that way. So in other words, he flipped on the pharmacy, and the people that were in the know, and act like, I'm just DEA, I don't know anything. Interviewer says, now you mentioned he had a cousin that looks similar to him. Oh yeah, John McGreevy says, I mean, he'll do anything for money. He's crap. He's a large guy. He's 6'2" or so, and a big bodybuilder. He has a cousin that looks almost like him, but he's skinny, just the face. The cousin, this is the little stuff. The cousin would go into banks, and with his ID, with his real ID, he would give it to him, and he'd go in and open up bank accounts, credit lines, things like this, and they'd max them out, just ruin, bounce checks and credit cards, everything they could possibly get. And then when it finally hit the fan, and the bank started collecting, or the credit agency started collecting, he would go into the bank as a DEA agent and say, who opened this account? He was like, well, this is me. I'm here. It was like, I am the one that opened it. No, well, no, you're enormous. Obviously, I don't remember you. And then it goes away. It wasn't him. Oh, wow. What a scam. You all hear this? Oh, my goodness. Well, he's done that lots of times. And so he had another scam where he actually got other agents shot because of this one, where he was calling as a phony DEA agent, calling people around the country randomly and telling them that a package had been intercepted and it had your name on it. It's drugs and it's drug precursors. Things like that. It's not in the country yet, and it's coming. If it gets to the country, I'm going to charge you. But if you pay a fine now, $1,200, $800, whatever, it'll go away here. It'll never get here, and he gets lots of people to pay it. But a lot of people would con, and a lot of people would be like, oh no, I'm not doing that. And they contacted the DEA, and it turned out that he was actually the DEA's point man on those complaints. So he was running. Oh my gosh, so they'd contact the DEA and they'd get him on the phone. Wow. On those. So he was the point man within the DEA for those kind of complaints. So he was running. He would run the scam that if anything came back, it went to him anyway. Wow. But I didn't remember some of this stuff. So this is just like, wow. But he did eventually get caught on that because, this is a nationwide scam. People all over the country doing this, because the 3 numbers he used to do these calls went to the payphone outside of where he worked, the payphone at the gas station about a block and a half from his house, and to a burner phone that he was known to use. So not so smart. And then a few of the people were able to record the conversations on the phone as evidence. They had an app or something. And so the victims he was calling, trying to run the scam on, they were able to get him recorded and get his voice on there, is what they're saying. So that's interesting. Good. That's good for them. And then when they called, they got switched around, and everybody was like, it's the same guy. They were like, holy crap. It was like, then something inaudible, didn't know what was happening. But because of that, because of the phony DEA people trying to make these phony arrests, there were actually real agents enacting a high-risk warrant in California who got shot. The guys, just as soon as they knocked, they said they had a warrant. They identified themselves. He just fired them up because he had heard about the phony agents, and it was because of him. And he got his own agents shot and doesn't care. So that's how he is. And the interviewer says, okay, the final thing on Rossetti, he says, you've mentioned before that he's worked with local mafia people in the Maryland area. He says, Conowingo pizza has been mentioned in the past. Can you give me more details about how that works? John McGreevy says, okay, well, it's, a whole new realm of stuff to worry about. Yeah, he protects certain people who can provide him with what he needs, more money. This is a relationship he's had for quite a while, and it's called Conowingo Pizza. I've never heard of it, on Route 1 in Cecil County, Maryland. It's a small place. I mean, Conowingo is not very big at all. but it's run like little Tony Anthony. He's his father, Big Tony, who is connected to the mafia in New Jersey and in New York. He runs the pizza place. So, but little Tony owns everything up there. He owns stuff on Route 40 all the way out. He owns millions and millions of dollars in real estate that he gets rent and everything. There's a little bit that's inaudible, and then a new paragraph starts. All that came from drugs. Rosati has worked with him for many years. So have the local police up there, and he's just not touchable, but he gets, well, this is his steady supplier, his steady source. They bring in the drugs once a week. They bring in dough from New Jersey and all of their trucks. It varies which one, but one of those will be a big drug shipment. Dough meaning like pizza dough. Then it's brought in, broken down, and taken out. It's only once a month, and there's a lot. We're talking hundreds of pounds of drugs broken down. Many of it, a lot of the heroin that's brought in could be, a couple of 100 pounds of heroin. It's actually broken down and taken down into Baltimore and DC. The interviewer says, so mostly heroin dealer then? And John McGreevy responds and says he is now. He used to be more coke, some pills, things like that. But the heroin has just jumped way, way up, and it's predominantly heroin at this point. So the interviewer says, now, is Rosati just running protection for them? Is he moving things for them? Or what's his role in that specific operation? Do you know? John McGreevy says, well, he can give them intelligence. Okay, says the interviewer. John continues and says, that's the big thing. If somebody is talking in Baltimore or DC, he can let them know, or Maryland. It provides intelligence. He gets paid. So in other words, he's like an inside guy. And if the police get tipped off or the DEA gets tipped off, he then runs to them and lets them know, hey, there's some talk going. And so it's interesting. He gets paid. He can provide him with whatever he needs. If he comes up on a bust or something because he's always skimming stuff, then he can move it through them. They'll gladly take care of what he comes up with. They were helping previously, but the big opioid crisis was going. No, I'm sorry. They were helping previously. When the big opioid crisis was going, he was coming up with 20, 30, 40,000 pills, opioid pills of one kind or another during a month. 1 month. They helped him move it because he had pharmacists that were working with him in Maryland, ones that he was protecting, and they set up, a softball thing. They set up nonprofit groups to launder all the money. But when he was getting so much, 20, 30, that 40,000 pills, they had to move there. I mean, he needed their help to move that kind of stuff, but he provides intelligence to this day. So the interviewer then asks John McGreevy, so now with this group, you've just described, actually, you mentioned one other Sean, an FBI guy, Sean Henry. John McGreevy says, he's just nasty. He's involved up to his eyebrows. His dirty trick squad, he's nasty. He's a lot like Strzok, talking about Peter Strzok. Thinks he's a computer expert, had no problem sending information to any foreign government that would pay. He's all about the money. He's CrowdStrike now. He's nasty. He's just a complete criminal with a badge or previously. He says he's not FBI now, but he's still connected to them, still helps with certain things, but he's a flat out criminal. The interviewer asks John McGreevy, or says to John McGreevy, okay, now, was there any specific tie-in with John Roberts, to this group with the things that they would do for Rod Rosenstein? He says, he continues and says, was this group involved in any of these plotted murders of the Supreme Court justices that you know of, or local judges? And he says, well, we covered some of this yesterday. So if you're watching, you're like, what's she talking about? And you didn't see yesterday, you're going to want to go back. So the interviewee, John McGreevy, says, well, they provided evidence, not evidence. I won't say evidence. They provided intelligence from illegal surveillance of one kind or another to the FBI people, to Sean Henry, who would take it to these FBI insiders, these false flag people who had infiltrated the group. So they were getting it from both sides. Roberts certainly knew about it. He helped with FISA warrants, anything that was connected to it. He knew about that side, of course, because he wanted a say in who would be replaced. And so we knew about that from yesterday's show. And so, and that all led to Scalia and all that. So, but they would, Roberts, wasn't involved in, with the day-to-day nitty-gritty of the Dirty Trick Squad because it was just day in and day out, constantly nonstop. And they, it just wasn't all, and then it becomes inaudible. And then it says, and drive around and more driving, things like this when they had some really nasty stuff to do, like with Cheryl Atkinson. Now, remember, he mentioned her earlier today, and that was the one where they planted the porn on her husband's computer. They did that from an apartment complex. You drive around with a laptop until you find an open port and you go in through there. So he was involved in the higher level planning, but not necessarily the nitty gritty of getting the intelligence and getting to the FBI people. That would be Henry, who would would get it to the FBI. So the interviewer says, okay, well, I think that's all the questions that we have for now. We'll probably reach back out if we have some more specifics that we want to get cleared up. Thank you for your time today, and we will be in contact. So he says, okay, thank you. I appreciate it. So that's the end of that. So then there's another one, and it's called Torture While in U.S. Custody. Let's see. So this is a little bit longer. Actually, it's quite a bit longer. So we're going to skip that one for today because it's too long. And we're already at 1 hour and 15 minutes. So we're going to keep seeing here. Yeah, this is a really long chapter. Wow, it's really long. Okay, so interview about Biden. Let's see what that one. So they interview him about Vice President Joe Biden. And of course, now he would be President Biden. Okay, I know what this is going to say. Okay, yeah, we can do this. And then after this one, this chapter will be done for today. Okay. All right, so we're going to talk about Vice President Joe Biden. Again, this was recorded in January 2021. This is John McGreevy with the interviewer. This is the whole Lin Wood stuff that, we're reading from the transcript. So everybody with me. Okay, so the interviewer says, okay, Ryan, talking about Ryan Dark White, which is also John McGreevy. He says, we're just going to, ask you discuss a little bit more about what you know about Joe Biden and his predilections toward young children and pedophilia and child pornography, and what you're aware of from the conversations you've had with Rosenstein and the Dirty Trick Squad. John McGreevy says Biden's a well-known pedophile. It's disgusting. Me and Mrs., we've seen him and family members, him and other children. Most people have seen now the image of him sniffing children on, and it's an official capacity. It's an award ceremony or promotion ceremony. And many times he just can't wait. Is the problem. It's like he's just over there doing that. In other words, sniffing children. He goes, those children have been promised to him for his role in the securities positions for their family members and for their parents. He says, so he can't control himself because he's anticipating his payoff. So that's why you see these sniffing videos, things like that. Some of them are just him being a disgusting pervert. The other ones, these are payments that he's going to get soon that night because he had come through on his. And so Obama would make all kinds of deals, promote people to this or that, but he always had to get his percentage, his 10%. He had to get something to keep him quiet. There's just unbelievable amounts of child porn online, and the DOJ has terabytes of it. Just anything confiscated, anything used was formatted for him for easy use by Sean Bridges, and it would play. You could just click one thing because it wasn't very he wasn't very computer savvy. He could just click and play, and it would just play you through everything that was on there due to the format, because many of the things were different kinds of files, phone and camcorder, this or just that computer. And he would just put them on there for him and separate pictures and video as one click. And then you could go through, and that's one of the jobs that Bridges had. He's talking about Sean Bridges, putting something in a way that Joe Biden would just click and it would play all the different kinds of porn. They would be supplied to him, talking about Joe Biden. Then he would go off to Delaware, and that's how they kept him happy and quiet and kept him out of Obama's hair. He never spent any night in D.C. at night, any time in D.C. at night. He'd always go up to Delaware. As far as Delaware, there was a judge, Emmett G. Sullivan, who owns, or he did own, I think he's sold a couple now, but He was the one who owned the homes in Lewes, Lewes, Delaware. So we talked about this yesterday under the Emmett Sullivan stuff. So like I was saying, there's some different crossover. He owned 3 or 4 homes. They were all the same small single family homes with a double car garage with a door. And they were the homes that Biden used to be supplied with children. And Sullivan is the same way. But he was doing things there with the little granddaughter and everything. And so was his one son. We talked about this yesterday. So if you watch yesterday's show, you'll know. But these are the homes that he used, and Sullivan owned them. So like I said, he has a couple, he has sold a couple since then, but the records they're all there. They're all already obtained. They were about 20 minutes away from Biden's compound in Delaware, and he was to be brought in to the back seat or SUVs right in, and the other person showed up, and most of the time they would be there ahead of time. He would just come in, spend whatever time he had in the back, and go out. Nobody saw a thing. Delaware is also a huge smuggling operation, not well known, but I mean, Delaware is a good corporate state, just for corporate protection, but it's also a humongous haven for registering yachts. The interviewer says, yeah. Well, interviewee John says thousands upon thousands of yachts are registered there, and they're also used for smuggling. I mean, higher end children, which is disgusting to even say, but the higher end clients, the guests, the ones that pay more, through Delaware into Jersey and New York and down. It's one of the big pit stops for smuggling these children to the higher end clients into DC. And then the interviewer says, are you aware of any of the types of children that Biden would mostly request? So John McGreevy says, he had boys too. He liked girls. He preferred girls. The interviewer says, age range? John McGreevy says, well, pretty much anywhere, like 5, 6, up to 14, 15. He didn't care. He preferred 12 or 13. He did not like black girls. I know that was a problem. Sullivan had offered his granddaughter, and he wouldn't do it because he thought that they were all dirty. Biden's like that too. He's disgusting in every way, but yeah. So yeah, the interviewer says, so there so the interviewer asks, are there any suits or any complaints against Biden for these types of allegations? And John McGreevy replies, really, they've been quiet. They are all kept quiet. They've been manipulated. His wife is nasty. And it's like 5 A's in there, nasty. His wife knew what he was like when she married him and hidden it all along. When he was on the campaign trail before this one, obviously he couldn't be supplied with his normal appetite of children. So they sent the little granddaughter or the nieces out to keep him quiet and happy on the campaign trail in these various states. These poor children have never known anything but abuse and terror. So his wife, talking about Jill, his wife managed all that. She gave him access to the special children in the school that she worked at years ago. The interviewer says, are there any rumors of tapes with Biden on it moving around there are. John McGreevy interrupts and says Biden's a lot smarter about that than his son, obviously, but there are some tapes. The interviewer says. And so then John McGreevy proceeds and says Hunter supposedly had some of them, but there are videos that he's made. There are Skype videos where it's him, but it's from here down with a child doing this where he's talking to someone else and you can't see the face. We can identify him by nipples or something, but it's him. But he's just got a lot more suave about that. He's been a politician a long time. He's more careful. The interviewer says, And so he says, so John McGreevy says, I don't think that he carries a phone anymore. His staff takes care of phones, so there's nothing really close. The interviewer asks, so what can you tell us about the Hunter Biden abuse? Was there any abuse towards Hunter by him? Oh yeah, John McGreevy says that you know of Hunter Biden as, individual. And John McGreevy says, yeah, it was his other son that was the one that he picked to be the political successor. And so the interviewer says, And John McGreevy says, and Bo actually covered up a big abuse scandal at the hospital. This one doctor and many other things that Bo had covered up, accusations against Joe Biden. He was actually general before he passed away, attorney general before he passed away, and he covered up cases and accusations against Joe Biden. He had covered up a doctor at the hospital with over 1,000 victims. Wow. Wow. Okay. And Biden has copies of those that he was provided by his son, Bo. He was given copies of everything the doctor had. The doctor was videotaping this stuff in his office when he was abusing over 1,000 children, and he was given copies of it, loved it. As far as Hunter's laptop, I haven't seen it. What I've been told from them was that the FBI got it originally, and they immediately went through and took out anything that would implicate them or Biden or anything like that. But the one that came from the repair shop is the whole copy that's still on there. So the original FBI copy is not going to match the one that they've got now. So, and then the interviewer says, gotcha. Okay. Anything else in here? The unknown female is whispering something. And then the interviewer says, so I guess the main tie-in for you for most of this information has been through Sean Bridges as he was editing and putting these things together to be given to Biden. Are there any other corroborating accounts or other people that have been in your circle that would be able to back up these as far as, and then John McGreevy says, well, yeah, I mean, there's the other people in the dirty trick squad. I mean, that's absolutely exists. There are actually references to it in court documents. I've referenced it in court documents, but good luck with them. I mean, they're going to be admitting to what? Murder? And he goes, the interviewer says, and then John McGreevy says, planning child porn, treason, sedition. I mean, you'd have to you'd have to make one hell of a deal to get them to talk. And then the interviewer says, yeah. And then John McGreevy says, but I mean, I certainly know what's going on. They certainly know me. The FBI is not going to talk. They're dirty as the day is long. They should be disbanded, talking about the FBI altogether. And so then the interviewer says, all right, well, thank you, Ryan. Okay, so Granny of Many said, just think of how many people in each state are corrupted. You know, this wasn't just DC. Our entire world had so much corruption. How did we not know? That's a great question. How did we not know? And when we have been told, people have hear stories about, well, I told my aunt, I told my uncle, I told my mother, I told my sister. People didn't believe. Krina 555 says, oh my gosh, I'm sick to my stomach. Littler DA says, I'm going to have to rewatch this. And Ray says, just a tip of the iceberg, Michelle. Yeah, Ray. Yeah. And Jeannie says, my blood boils to hear this. Absolutely disgusting. I'm glad this is coming out, though. It needs to. Yes. And so, just terrible. I think DMDS says, I think Lin Wood has all his interviews as well. He was hiding, he was hiding. John McGreevy is not alive anymore. That's right. I used to follow him on Twitter a few years ago. That's right. He came up missing, dead. I think it was May of last year. Michelle said yesterday, he's no longer with us. That's right. Yep. So John McGreevy is dead. So these were all done. Again, I just want to recap in January of 2021. These videos were released that is at michellemooreshow.com. If you click on Lin Wood, I think it may just say Lin Wood, I'm not sure, or Lin Wood Whistleblower, something like that. It's the very first black rectangle on the site. If you click on that, there's like 7 videos, and then there's this transcript that I'm reading from. And so we read 2 of the sections yesterday. I think we've read 3 today. And so lots of information here. Reality is going to hit many people hard right between the eyes when all this finally comes out. The sad thing is it's been out. This has been out. I'm not giving you exclusive behind the scenes stuff. This has been out. In fact, it's been on Michelle Moore Show for months. Because we covered some other things, and I said something about the Lin Wood whistleblower and said, I'll just put it on the site. But this is the first time that I've actually read through it with you. It's been a few years since I've read this, so I forgot about the doctor. And so that kind of hit me a little hard. Just like Allie said last night, talking about, yes, Allie that we ran last night. She said last night, we don't know the world we live in. Yeah, that's a great point, Lily 21. Great point. Excellent point. And it's unfortunate. And I don't think, we've heard, I think most of us have probably heard where it was said somewhere. I don't know if it was a supposed Q drop or whatever, but, we've heard like, well, if we knew what was really going on, if we knew the truth about everything, it would put like 99% of us in the mental institutions or 98, whatever the number was that they told. And so I've heard this for quite a few years now. And the more that I learn, the more that I'm just amazed, like a doctor who's abusing 1,000 children. But, it's like we think about that. I was watching an interview with Tara Reid, talking with Tucker Carlson this morning. It's an old interview, but she brought up Seth Rich and said, if I would have been, killed, then it would have just been another headline for a couple of days at most by a few people. And then that would have been just about it. It would have moved on. And so it's unfortunate. And that's part of why the whistleblower is coming forward tomorrow, is to shine a light on a murder that happened and how it's all connected to some things that but there's more details to it. And so we've got this whistleblower who's coming forward. It'll be interesting. So Rebecca Jordan says, Michelle, I do so appreciate you and your great producer, Ron. Thank you. You're welcome. It's a calling. This is what I'm assigned to do right now. So, I'll continue to do these shows and continue to search for the truth as long as God has me doing it. And so we're doing just the best we can and to bring you the information. So I do say, obviously this is just awful and worse than we can imagine. I mean, this is sick. This stuff is just absolutely sick and disgusting. And good people are having to deal with a lot of bad evil. And there are children. This is why I get frustrated. There are veterans that need help. There are people that are disabled. Some of them are veterans, some aren't. You have the elderly, you have children. And so, you have people that need help with medications like ivermectin, who their state has outlawed it. Their doctors won't prescribe it. Pharmacies wouldn't fulfill it. They won't do hydroxychloroquine. That's why we have what we're doing. We're at 1,000 prescriptions now that have been filled and shipped throughout the United States. I mean, we're doing some real work here. And then you've got people trying to screw it all up. And so, or focusing on things that just don't matter. And so, that's where I have to say, like, you got to pray for wisdom, knowledge, and discernment. I've told you the truth about everything that I can possibly tell you. And we're focusing on the children. We're focusing on the courts, the lawfare. I mean, that's part of what Tara Reid is going to be here talking about. She don't really want to talk about what happened to her in the assault in 1993 with Joe Biden. She's here to really talk about the lawful side of it and what's happened with her with the lawfare. And so there's just so much stuff. And so Allie Carter was, by the way, if you don't know what we're talking about, Allie Carter was trafficked to the Diddy parties and different things. It's in the news right now. She tried to tell people years ago. She also says that she was trafficked to Joe Biden. I don't remember if it was Joe Biden. I know specifically she was trafficked to Obama and his supposed wife. And so if you missed that video, it's about 25 minutes. We aired it last night. It's on Truth Talk America Rumble channel, and it's also available on Michelle Moore Show's Rumble channel. And so you can go and watch it. It's easy to find. It was just last night. And so that's Allie Carter, and she has been speaking out. And I've reached out to her numerous times trying to get her on the show. She and her mother are in hiding and would love to have her on the show. So if anybody knows her, reach out to her and let her know that she's always welcome to be here on the Michelle Moore Show. She was trafficked as a child, and I think that we have no clue what hell she's been through. Janine MHF says, Allie was so upset about all paying attention to the adults, but not about paying attention to what's happening to the children. That's right. That's right. So everybody's talking about, Obama, TD Jakes, this, that. But what about the kids? Fake news pushing the adult thing. Look here, not there. That's right. And so that's why we aired it. We aired it. And I bet you it's probably had, producer Ron made a comment to me saying it was in the top 5 at 1:00 today. So it's probably still doing really well. Needs to. We need to push it out. You need to share it. We need to get the word out. That's why we aired it. And it's not every day that I have producer Ron do a special presentation just so that way we can get what someone is saying out. But I felt it was so important. I'd seen it yesterday morning and I saw what she was talking about, and we're going to support her. We're just like we did earlier in the week with Yeshua and his father Othello. And they're on the run as well, which reminds me, people have been asking, is there a way to support them because they are in hiding? And yes, so if you want to send money, you can email me if you want to send a donation. And I now have a way for, if you have, I think he has like Cash App, and he just set up a Venmo because I have Venmo. So you can send me a check, or you can Venmo it to him directly, or I think the Cash App thing, I don't have Cash App. So if you want to use Cash App, you could do that. I can give you the account and help you with that. So just send me an email if you want to make a donation, and I can help you. Just let me know how you want to make the donation so I know what information to send you. SSW Razorback says, Michelle, I cannot thank you enough for helping me get the script I need. I'm talking about prescription. I need to get healthy. You're welcome. You and the doctor and the pharmacist are doing God's work. God bless you all. Thank you. Yes. And it was God that told me to do it. And it's only God that could have made those connections. I could tell you exactly where I was when the idea came to me, and I was on the phone with the pharmacist. And then Doc Basham is amazing, just absolute amazing. So we have another one. Nykern 65 says, Michelle, you are amazing. You and Ron continue to bring it every day. God bless you both. Thank you so much. Look, we're just doing our part. So we're not trying to, do anything to be amazing. We're just doing our part. A lot of people are hurting. And so while we're at it, we got a couple of minutes here. I want to show you, I forget his name. We showed him yesterday, but apparently his mommy and daddy won 2 different prizes for him. It's not Griffin. I forget his name. But look there. Oh, my goodness. Isn't he cute? He won the dog bed. And so through Flashaganza, isn't that dog good looking? Like, he's too cute. Winston, thank you. I was like, Burton, I could not remember. Winston, look at Winston. He's like, I live here and I own this place and I got 2 passive incomes, a mama and a daddy. He's like Flashmore, living his best life. Amazing. Winston is adorable, like too adorable. DMDSE says, thank you, Michelle, for all that you do. Stay safe. God bless. You're welcome. Waiting for Jesus, our Savior, to return soon. Oprah trafficked Allie as well. Natalie says, okay, so I'd never seen Allie Carter and had no idea that she's Tupac's daughter. Okay, didn't know that either. So Celeste is saying, I'd never seen Allie Carter and had no idea she's Tupac's daughter. Is that true? I don't know. That's interesting. Very interesting. I don't know. But now I saw something this morning that said something about how a lot of the rap stars are apparently related. So I don't know if that's true, but if you think about it, I always say that an indication that something is wrong with someone is if they have family members that are also famous. So for example, Britney Spears and her sister. Okay, so that was a bad sign. You start seeing Julia Roberts and her niece. So then you start thinking, okay, I think there's something going on there. And that was always my gauge when I started opening up and my eyes started really being opened up to things. And so it was like, uh-oh. And I think it's very odd that so many people have twins. And I also think it's very odd that so many people have adopted children that have darker skin, whether they're looking like they're from Cambodia or Haitian, kind of looking like from Haiti, or Black. I think that's odd. Sandra Bullock, there's a bunch of them that's done that. And I just was like, well, why aren't they adopting kids from America? It's like, but then when you listen to Yeshua and his father Othello the other day talking about the skin, and there's some stuff there that we didn't completely get into, but adrenochrome is not the only thing that they're doing, and it has to do with the skin. It's awful, and they were fattening him up. Remember, he said they had him on a drug that added weight to him every year. They had fattened Yeshua up, and the reason was because if they were to decide to kill him, then there would be more blood, more bodily fluids. All of that is the way that his father described it to me when I talked with him the first time. So there's something else going on, and it's not all adrenochrome. KM Sunshine 1974 said, I love these kinds of shows. Very informative. God bless Michelle and producer Ron. Lay LFWI says, and the coincidence that stars all have family members horrifically murdered. Okay, now, so two things about that. We just feel like we're having a conversation here. One big happy family with the Michelle family. Okay, so yes, and I think a lot of times it's the firstborn son. And then did you know that not only, so yes, the deaths, because that's a sacrifice, right, is what they're talking about. But another form of sacrifice, come to find out, isn't necessarily that the child was murdered, okay? Another form, it can be that, or they have to do a gender transition. So that's why you see a lot of times the son as a girl or the girl as a boy. Think about it, even Cher. Cher had, the girl that's a boy. I mean, it goes back decades. And so this is all this transgender agenda has been in the works, and the gay and the lesbian thing. And, of course, these are people that think that, the world needs to depopulate. So all of this feeds into that. Anything that is not of God, really, of our creator, our heavenly father, it's like they're against anything he is for. And I'm just reminded of Hope Beryl Green, who was born into the Illuminati. I interviewed her. Gosh, I've interviewed her a number of times. I've had 3 truther events, and she has spoken at all 3. She's amazing. She met Joe Biden. She was trafficked to Epstein Island. But I've learned a lot from her. She knew all about Disney. I mean, they're talking 4 years ago, 5 years ago. And so she's really filled me in on a lot of things that were going on Epstein Island and stuff. We'll need to have her on again sometime soon, or at least re-air her interviews, because they're incredible. But she talked about, she was actually bred. Well, they killed her birth mother during her birth. And then she was in captivity. They would show her the outside and say, but you're too evil to be able to go outside. And she was like 4. She was raised in like a hospital setting. And then they would come in, and 2 men would be there. 1 man would be there to rape her and abuse her. And another man would be dressed as Jesus, and he would be reading scriptures over them. And so what she was really programmed to be part of what would help take churches down. And so what's amazing is one of the churches that she was sent to was in Kentucky, and it was a pastor and his wife, and it ended up being that they're the ones that saved her out of captivity. And so she was about 30 years old. She had been having her programming breaking down, is what they call it, where they pretty much plan to kill you at 30. And so Kathy O'Brien has talked about that she ended up getting saved by Mark Phillips right when she was turning 30. She started having breakthrough memories, and they call it breaking down of the programs. But Hope Beryl Green had been experiencing that as well in her early 20s. And so when she would have that, they'd send her off a couple of different times. They sent her off, and she said, the signs out front would say Christian Hospital, and whether it was Texas or up north somewhere. And so she would be sent off for, programming. And I'm like, okay, well, what does programming look like? And she's like, they were raping me and, drugging me and all different kinds of things, and splitting off her personalities, shocking her, just all different kinds of things. And so because they have to traumatize and split those personalities off. And so it's just terrible. It's horrific abuse. And it's just scary to think about how many people have gone through this, and we just had no idea. We got another viewer that says the Illuminati believe if you hurt children, that you're hurting God. Yeah, that's why they can't stand. Because remember, God loves the children, the little children. He even talks about it, about the millstone. You might as well put a millstone around your neck, and it's not going to be good for you if you hurt children. I listened to about a man who had infiltrated. What was it? Was it not the New World Order? It was the UN. And he had prepared for 2 years, and he had infiltrated the UN, and he talked about that. And he said, that the one thing he really had to kind of grasp is that they were after the children. And it was like, why children? Why? Well, yeah, we want to talk about adrenochrome and some of that kind of stuff, but also it was about that it had to do with God. God loves the children, and they despise God so much. And so it was, anything good, anything, again, that God is for, they're against. And that's really what we have to remember. Jenny Lee says, Luke 17:2, it would be better for him if a millstone, she's saying the same thing I am, a millstone were hung around his neck and he were thrown into the sea, then he should offend one of these little ones. Yeah. Yes. Deborah Lynn W. said, I would love a Disney show so my husband would learn the truth about them. He and his sons have an unhealthy love for anything Disney. And I have tried explaining to my husband about Disney, but it's not all there. Okay, so here's the thing about Disney, and I'm going to bring this to your attention, okay? So the Holy Spirit, I think, really is who really just kind of gave me that aha moment, revealed this to me. And I did see something about Walt Disney the other day that he was above a 33 member level, and that he was really like a magician. And so that's why there's so much about magic and magical. It's a magical place. Everything's magical. Well, where does God talk about magic? God is not in magic. Okay. And so God is not a God of magic. If you have magic, then Jesus wasn't enough. I mean, it just makes sense. And so that's why I have nothing to do with Disney. We do not have a thing in our house that has anything to do with any of that stuff. And so because it's like, it's all, and then of course, if you read a couple of books, I've read some books, Bryce Taylor talks, she claims to be owned by Bob Hope. And she was a presidential model like Kathy O'Brien as well. And she talks about being taken as a little girl. She was raised in California. And she talks about at night at like 9 o'clock when all the kids are leaving and they got the stuffed animals and the balloons and the, cotton candy and all that. And they're leaving the park. Her parents are bringing her in to the park. And so she was being dropped off. And of course, they talk about how all of the torture and stuff being tied to water rides and thinking you're going to die and, all that kind of stuff. And so to split off the brain, the different stuff. So you had, back in the day, you had multiple personality disorder, right? We really don't hear that. Now, we hear DID, dissociative identity disorder is what they call it now. And so Celeste says, I saw a video of her saying Tupac is not deceased and faked his death. She was taken at 3 months old. Oh, wow. Yeah. And she's pretty, and Tupac was a good looking guy. So I wouldn't be surprised at all if she's Tupac's daughter. I wouldn't know. I hadn't seen anything about that. I haven't seen her say that. Oh, Natalie says, yes. Allie also says Tupac isn't dead either. There you go. So very interesting. I would think Allie would know. And so there's no telling what all Allie knows. And so, but her name's Allie Carter. And, we showed the photo earlier. So if you didn't see what she's put out night before last, she does tell the date. I saw it yesterday morning, sent it to producer Ron and asked that we do a special. So we talk about it in yesterday's show. And then we aired it last night. So if you go back and watch yesterday's show, it ran last night and it's all there for you. Okay. I think we've pretty much covered all the viewer comments and questions that we've got. The firstborn male was to be holy to the Lord. Did not remember that at all. That's why that's maybe why it's supposed to be the firstborn male. I've just noticed that. So a lot of people, I wonder about Rick Warren. He lost a son, but I think he has 2 sons. I wonder if it was the older son that passed away. That would be interesting to know. So I just happened to notice that trend that it's always the son and almost always, and that it's usually the oldest one. So, very interesting. And you look at so many people that have these kids that are so messed up. Look at, Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt. They have twins. They have adopted children. They have one, I think it's Shiloh, that's going around dressing like a boy. I mean, what's up with all this? And so I just don't think, and then you got J-Lo, one's looking very boyish. Kamala Harris got a daughter looking like a mess and dressing like a boy. I mean, there is no telling what they have done to these kids. And that's exactly what I suspect personally that I think. I mean, listen to what we just heard. The grandchildren have been in hell their whole lives, is what John McGreevy is saying in this that I just read to you. And so this is horrific. And so we're talking about the grandchildren to the president of the country, supposedly. And the vice president, Kamala Harris's kids, it's like, geez, Louise. And then, you look at Trump's kids and they're gorgeous and, accomplished and amazing and adding to society in so many different amazing ways. And so it's just day and night. And so I actually had a conversation this afternoon with a guy, and he just out of nowhere said, I've been born and bred Democrat my whole life. He goes, but I got to tell you, I sure am hoping Trump gets back in office because I can't understand all these prices. And I just thought, oh my goodness, he doesn't even know that I have anything to do with politics. He just started talking about it. And I just stood there and looked at him, and, he's telling me all this stuff. And I thought, well, there you go. We got Democrats waking up. He said his whole life, he'd been born and bred Democrat. And he said, Joe Biden's messed up the whole country. That's what he said. I went, okay. Yeah. And so, but that's somebody just randomly starts talking about what's going on. Isn't that great? And so amazing. All right. Well, I hope that you have learned quite a bit from today. And again, you can go to MichelleMooreShow.com, listen to all 7 of the audios that Lin Wood put out. We've helped to enhance those audios so that they're louder. Producer Ron, got to give it to him. He takes care of all that stuff for me. When I'm like, I don't like how this is, it's too low, it's hard to hear. And if it's hard to hear for me, and I'm always thinking about my older viewers. And so I'm like, we got to fix this. Can you fix it? Can you try? And he right away, yep, got it all done. I was like, oh my goodness. Took him 20 minutes and he had 7 audios all fixed up for us and replaced and in the box, ready to go for yesterday's show. It was just amazing. So y'all be sure in the chat, if you're watching live, to give producer Ron a big kudos and a shout out, because the show wouldn't be as great as it is if it wasn't for producer Ron helping all the time. All right. Well, we'll see you right here next time on the Michelle Moore Show.
Toxic chemicals are everywhere, even in products we've used for generations. Now there's a replacement solution. Godly Granny. Godly Granny products are nutraceutical, clean products with purpose. All our products like skin creams, bath bombs, lip scrubs, deodorants, and more are free of the Godly Granny 5 Dirty Dozen list. That's 60 harmful chemicals many other companies use that you'll never find in our products. Go to godlygranny.com today. Be sure and use the discount code Michelle10 at checkout to receive 10% off your entire order.
Trying to get healthier is full of can'ts.
Come on, Grandma, come play. Come play with us, Grandma.
I can't move. So you go to the doctor.
Your body can't figure this out. So take this, and this.
Because your body can't. But is it true your body can't? Maybe your body can. All you need is a little support. Wave Watch is a wearable device that uses sound wave therapy to help your body heal itself. Studies are showing that all cells in our bodies resonate at unique frequencies, and specific sounds can stimulate them. Your body can deal with pain, so you can play hard.
WaveWatch comes with a 1-year manufacturer's warranty for defects and flaws, and you can upgrade to an additional warranty for water damage and breakage. Go to WaveWatch.com. Be sure to use the discount code Michelle100 at checkout to receive $100 savings on your purchase.
Hey, Mr. Wonderful here, and I'm here with my gold guy, Dr. Mike Fulges, a silver and gold expert. Hey, Mike, what do we have here?
Today I have a few, actually 50, 2025 $5 gold American Eagles. Each is a 10th ounce of gold and is a starter coin for investors.
So this is the way people can invest. They can buy a whole bunch of coins and just hold on to them, right?
Correct. They have these in 10th ounce, quarter ounce, half ounce, and 1 ounce sizes.
Now, if they want to buy them now, wait a couple of years and sell them again so they have liquidity, can they do that with you?
Immediately. We buy millions every month back from clients.
So you really are the gold guy.
That's why we're America's gold expert.
For Michelle's social media links, go to MichelleMooreShow.com.